Welcome to Cinema Bites.
나는 저주받았다.
Your go-to for movie recaps in a flash. Big twists, epic moments, all in just minutes. The series' S-line begins with Rishon, whom Bia, since she was born, has had the ability to see the red lines that connect people who have had romantic relationships. When she was little, the young girl didn't understand the meaning of those lines, but she knew she was the only one who could see them. Eventually, as she matured, Rishon understood what those lines meant and made drawings to represent what she saw. One day, through her drawings, her mother discovered that her father was cheating on her with her aunt and decided to attack him with a knife. After losing her father, Rishon discovered that her gift was actually a curse. She decided to isolate herself to prevent other people from getting hurt. When she reached adulthood, the young woman was in a deep depression and decided to end it all. However, no matter how many times or in what way she tried to end it, she could never complete her plan. Apparently, besides seeing the red threads, Rishon was also immortal. So, since she would have to live with that burden, the young woman dedicated her life to discovering why those lines had appeared. The curiosity to know who created those threads and who else could see them drove Rishon to start an investigation, because with those answers, maybe she could break her curse. One day, Rishon receives a visit from a woman who lives in the building across the street, but decides not to answer the door. After ringing the bell several times without any response, Yoon leaves, but leaves a bag of fruit as a gift for her neighbor. After several years eating canned peaches, Yoon delights in devouring a fresh fruit and realizes the pleasures she is missing by choosing to imprison herself at home. That day, while climbing the stairs to the school rooftop, Sun is attacked by a group of girls, and instead of helping her get out, Rishon knocks her classmate down with a kick. Then the young woman drags Sun by the hair and threatens to throw her off the building if the girl tells the principals that she is being bullied by her classmates. Meanwhile, her uncle, who is a police officer, investigates the case of a 29-year-old woman who was found lifeless in her room. At nightfall, Rishon discovers that her neighbor left more fruit for her, and while reading the note left by Rishon, she learns about the criminal case through the news. The reporter informs that the victim was found with marks on her neck in her apartment, and according to the police, there are clear signs of a break-in at the scene. While looking at the TV, Rishon spots a motorcyclist approaching the building and notices that he has only one red line above his head. Hours later, she hears a motorcycle noise again, and looking out the window, Rishon sees that same guy breaking into the building where she lives. Worried about the woman's safety, she calls the police to report the break-in, but soon discovers that Yoon is the person the motorcyclist is connected to. Seeing them hugging, Yoon is surprised and hangs up the phone, as she is totally confused and lost in her own thoughts. The next day, after a long night of work, Han arrives home and discovers that his niece didn't go to school. When he sees the young woman injured, the detective learns that she was attacked, but Sun refuses to give details about what happened. Going out onto the balcony to get some air, Han sees Rishon's window and wonders why the glass is covered with cardboard. When he discovers that the police station received a call the previous night from someone living in that apartment, the detective decides to go there and ring the bell. Through the peephole, Rishon sees the hundreds of lines above that man's head, but decides to open the door to explain herself. After explaining the mistake she made, the young woman closes the door and Han leaves. That night during dinner, he discovers that the victim who was found lifeless in her apartment had an ex-boyfriend who lives in the same building as Rishon. Convinced that the man might be involved in the case, Don decides to break into his apartment during the night and, with the help of a flashlight, finds a storage room full of suspicious items. At that moment, Don grabs his cell phone and calls the detective, but ends up being attacked by John, who uses a metal bar to hit him. Seeing the madman approaching, Don tries to dodge, but ends up being hit on the head and faints. Realizing his friend is in trouble, Han steps on the gas and drives to the building. After tying up the policeman, John puts on his helmet and walks to the building across the street. Seeing him, Rishon again feels that her neighbor is in danger, so she grabs a kitchen knife and goes after the motorcyclist. However, upon leaving the building, the young woman starts having a panic attack and faints. When she opens the door, Yoon is happy to see her boyfriend, but soon realizes that he has a different look in his eyes, and the man grabs her neck. Suddenly, Rishon appears, but is paralyzed with fear and cannot react. At that moment, the criminal grabs the knife from her hand and attacks the young woman. Seeing her neighbor wounded, Hyeon strikes the criminal and tries to help Rishin, but John attacks her again. At that moment, Han parks the car next to the building and enters Han's apartment as he saw the door open. Looking out the window, he draws his gun to shoot the man, and when the madman is about to attack Han once again, the detective pulls the trigger. Seconds before losing his life, he sees the line above his head disappear and begins to smile. Minutes later, the ambulance arrives, and Hyeon is taken to the hospital. After rescuing his friend, Han goes to talk to Rishin and returns her sunglasses. Suddenly, Sun appears, and the detective discovers that Rishin and his niece know each other. According to Sun, they were classmates in elementary school, until Rishin was abandoned by her mother soon after her father passed away. After using her gifts to save someone's life, the young woman starts to see the red lines in a different way and decides to accept her destiny. Hours later, when the sun is about to rise, Rishin receives a message from an unknown number and discovers it is another person with the same ability. The next day, when she arrives at school, Sun discovers that Rishin opened her locker and found a letter she had received. Humiliated in front of her whole class, Sun attacks the student and tries to get her letter back, but Rishin knocks her down and starts hitting her. When the teacher enters the room and sees the two students fighting, she defends Sun and allows her to go home early. While investigating John's apartment to discover why he attacked his own girlfriend, Sun finds the storage where he kept suspicious items and notices that the walls are completely covered with drawings of red lines. When she gets home, Sun puts on the glasses she found at school and starts to see a thread on top of her head. Looking at her uncle while wearing the accessory, she sees hundreds of lines and screams in despair. Surprised by the new discovery, the girl walks through the streets looking at people and trying to understand what those red lines mean. While observing, Sun notices that some threads are connected and wonders what the link is between those people. After a few hours, the young woman finally discovers what those lines mean and goes to school feeling confident. When she gets there, she finds out that her teacher is one of the few people at that school who has never had any relationships, while at the same time discovering that Rai has had numerous ones, connecting the red thread from her head even to teachers. That day, teacher Gil Jin introduces the students to their new classmate named Rao, and Hai immediately starts mocking her. Worried about his niece's recent behavior, Sun decides to go to the school, where she studies to talk to the teacher. After collecting some information about his niece, the detective asks if Gil Jin ever met a guy named John, as he was a math teacher at that school until the previous year. When she finds out that her former colleague was a criminal, Miss Gil Jin is surprised, and when questioned, she states that John didn't usually wear glasses. On the rooftop, when she is attacked again by Hai and her gang, Sun is about to use her trump card, but is interrupted by the arrival of Raul. In an attempt to defend her classmate, Hyeon starts a confrontation with Hai and threatens to jump off the rooftop with her if the girl doesn't promise to leave them alone. After almost losing her life, the student decides to leave, and Sun orders Hyeon not to get involved in her business again. That night, Sun follows Hai in an attempt to collect evidence of her involvement with the teacher and manages to catch the two entering a hotel. When she receives the photo, Sai says that if the image leaks, only the teacher will be punished, since she is still a minor. After reading this message, Sun starts thinking of another strategy and sends the image directly to the teacher, demanding 20 million won in cash. Sun's goal is to use that money to move to another city, as she doesn't want to keep living with her uncle or attending the same school. When accompanying her to the bathroom, Hyeon notices that her friend is wearing new glasses and soon realizes that she can see the red lines while using that accessory. Surprised, Sun asks a few questions to confirm if Hyeon can also see those lines and reveals that she found the glasses by chance at school. According to Hyeon, John was wearing those glasses when he died, which indicates that the object may be dangerous. Even after hearing this, Sun chooses to continue using her new ability, as this is her best chance to get revenge on the people who used to bully her. That night, Sun is at her new boyfriend's house when she receives a message from the teacher, asking her to meet him on the school rooftop at midnight to get the money. What the girl doesn't know is that Hyeon was in one of the bathroom stalls when Sun and Hyeon were talking about the red lines, so she knows about the power of the glasses. Thus, Rai follows the girl to the arcade, and while Sun is taking pictures with her boyfriend, the student steals the glasses from her bag. When she realizes her glasses are gone, Sun panics and goes back to look for them, but can't find them anywhere. Furious, the girl calls Hyeon and accuses her of stealing her glasses, but despite this, she decides to go to school to meet the teacher. However, when she gets there, Sun discovers that he lied about having the money and only lured her there to try to convince her to keep their affair a secret. If that photo spreads, besides losing his job, the teacher will also lose his wife and children. But Sun insists on receiving the 20 million as payment. During the conversation, the man receives a message from his wife and discovers that she has already received the photo. Furious, he pushes Sun off the cliff, believing that she was responsible for destroying his marriage. When she arrives at the school looking for her friend, Hyeon sees the girl fall to the ground and discovers that Sun has suffered a serious accident. Terrified, the young woman calls an ambulance and accompanies Sun to the hospital, but the doctors are unable to revive her. When he finds out that his niece is hospitalized, Han is deeply saddened and blames himself, believing she tried to end it all, but Hyeon assures him that Sun was pushed by someone. The next day, when he arrives at school, Professor Kim is asked about his wedding date and informs them that his engagement was cancelled. Now that he has separated from his fiancée, Kim moves into his sister's house and brings a stuffed rabbit as a gift for his niece. The man says he will stay for only a week, as he intends to move to Canada in a few days. That day, when she arrives at school, Hyeon goes up to the terrace, where she meets Kim and Jin. Although not close to Radel, the girl shows interest in finding out who pushed her, as she is obsessed with all kinds of investigations. During the break, Professor Kim finds a pair of glasses on his desk, and after trying them on, he also begins to see the red lines. Suddenly, Hannah enters the room and asks permission to speak with Miss Gil-jin. Believing that the girl jumped off the cliff, the teacher blames herself for not realizing she was having psychological problems, but the detective states that his niece was pushed. He then asks about Hai's whereabouts, as he heard she was following Sun, but the teacher reveals that the girl did not show up at school that day, which makes everything even more suspicious. In an attempt to gather evidence about the case, Han decides to interrogate Song's boyfriend, and Ji-won says that after taking those photos, the girl left desperately looking for her glasses. Watching the store's security camera footage, the detective sees the exact moment when Hai takes his niece's bag and steals the glasses that were inside. Later during dinner, Kim uses his new glasses and notices that his brother-in-law has a large number of red threads above his head. When asked about the end of his engagement, the teacher reveals that one day, when he arrived home from work, he found his wife in bed with his friend. Then Jun and his brother-in-law go out to talk, and Kim discovers that he is having an affair with a resident of the building. When both are going back up to the apartment, Kim presses the 4th floor button, and as soon as the door opens, the red line points to the apartment where Jun's lover lives. At that moment, he tries to leave the elevator, but is pulled back to go to the 10th floor. The next day, when he arrives home with his sister and niece, Kim finds a box that was sent to the resident of 401, and decides to go down to deliver it personally, aiming to discover who is his brother-in-law's secret relationship. Days later, the photo of Hai with the teacher spreads around the school, and both students and teachers are shocked by the news. After losing everything most important that he built in his life, Professor Song-jun is consumed by feelings of guilt and shame, so he decides to end it all. After visiting the crime scene, Han picks up Ryan at school and asks if she knows any reason that made his niece return to school on the night of the tragedy. At that moment, the young woman asks the detective to find Song's glasses, as this will help him understand what happened that night. Meanwhile, Kim is following Jun and finds him in a high-end restaurant with his neighbor from 401. Determined to expose him, the teacher calls his brother-in-law and asks where he is. But Jun lies, saying he is not in Seoul. After proving that his brother-in-law is a compulsive liar, Kim returns home and hours later shows up at the hotel where Jun is with his lover. When discovered, the lunatic tries to explain himself to convince his brother-in-law to keep the affair a secret until he has time to talk to Hai. The next day, Kim packs his bags to leave and says goodbye to his sister, as he does not know when he will see her again. While gathering his things at work, the teacher receives a message and discovers that his sister crashed into a neighbor's car. After being informed about the affair, Hyeon takes her car and crashes it several times into Shihim's vehicle, who is extremely frightened by the attack. While Kim tries to calm his sister, Jun arrives at the scene, and instead of siding with his wife, he runs to comfort his love. Furious at this attitude, Kim punches his brother-in-law, but his sister interrupts the attack. As soon as the couple leaves, Hyeon reveals the truth to her brother. The woman says that, in fact, she is the lover, as June is married to Shi. After being discovered by Kim, he decided to end his affair with Hyeon, and that's why the woman freaked out. After finding his niece's diary, Han discovers that the glasses she wore allowed her to see something that no one else could see, and decides to interrogate Hyeon to find out what those drawings mean. Upon hearing the explanation about the meaning of those red lines, the detective states that this story is absurd, but does not think that Roan is lying. That weekend, the young woman gets a job as a receptionist at the Mission Hotel, and spends the whole night at the front desk while Han and Detective Dom gather all the information collected so far to try to find out who pushed Sum from the terrace. By connecting the photos of everyone involved on a single board, they conclude that Professor Song Joon ended everything due to the guilt he felt for having pushed the girl. On Sunday, Hyeon receives a visit from two school friends who decided to keep her company during her shift. When she sees one of the clients taking a key and going up to a room, Hyeon Jung recognizes her and states that she works in the school's administrative department. After spending a few hours alone in the room, Misun goes home and looks at the city with her glasses to see the millions of red lines floating in the sky. When she returns home, Roan turns on the TV and discovers that a new victim was eliminated the previous night. The perpetrator was arrested near the scene and confessed everything he did with a smile on his face. Upon seeing images of the criminal, Roan realizes he is wearing a pair of glasses identical to Song's and realizes that there are other glasses that give their users the ability to see the S-line. On Monday, after class, Hyeon approaches Roan and invites her to visit his swimming school. He remembers that the young woman said she likes empty places and takes the opportunity to spend some time alone with her. Since he first saw Roan, Hyeon has begun to develop an interest in her, and thanks to Kyeon, found an opportunity to get closer to the girl, even without knowing anything. Roan feels the urge to jump into the water, and Hyeon quickly enters the pool to prevent her from drowning. Then, while waiting for their uniforms to dry, they eat instant noodles, and Roan talks about her ability to see red lines on people's heads. The young woman reveals that, just like her, Hyeon and Kyeon do not have any red thread, and even without understanding what these lines mean, the boy says he believes her. The following weekend, once again, Misun books room 206 at the Misun Hotel, and while cleaning the hallways, Roan hears her screaming at herself while looking in the mirror as if she were rehearsing something to say to someone. A few months ago, in that same room, the woman found the glasses that gave her the power to see the S-lines, and since then her hobby has been complete. Misun's favorite pastime is watching the guests in room 205 through a hole in the wall, but when she sees Miss D's on the other side, she is surprised. Ever since she first saw the music teacher, Mason fell in love with him, and upon discovering that the man is meeting with Kylan, the woman breaks down. At that moment, she goes down to the reception and says she wants to extend her stay until the next day. Then, when Kylan shows up to meet Lee once again, Mason hits her with a fire extinguisher and puts on the woman's clothes to go meet the music teacher. When he sees his co-worker in his room, Lee wonders what is going on and is even more confused when she begins to recite the lines she practiced in front of the mirror. Then, when Mason goes toward him, Lee pushes her away and gets up to leave but ends up passing out before reaching the door. After taking the teacher back to bed, Mason reveals that she put a sleeping pill in his water and hugs Lee while waiting for him to wake up. However, at that moment, the woman sees a bloodstain spreading on the pillow and panics, because the last thing she intended to do was to end the life of the man she secretly desired all this time. Then, when the red thread disappears, Mason feels guilty and ends up using a stapler to hurt herself multiple times. Hours later, Kylan manages to get out of the room and finds Ryan, who helps her free herself from her restraint. Then, a young woman enters room 205 and sees the body of Professor Lee. When Han arrives, he finds Mason's body and searches for her glasses all over the room, but cannot find them. When talking to the detective, Ryan states that Mason always wore a pair of glasses while at work and reveals that the object messes with the minds of its users. According to her, Mason had only one red line that did not connect there, so it is impossible to know what motivated the attack. When night falls and all the police have already left, Detective Han returns to the hotel and decides to empty the bathtub where Mason's body was found. When he does this, he finds the glasses the woman was wearing and puts them on. Then, the detective looks at himself in the mirror and can see for himself the red lines Ryan was talking about. Here the series ends. If you liked the video, subscribe to the channel and activate the notification button so you never miss an updates. See you in the next video.